Okay, we're back here. This is another instance of my having to repeat the same recording again, which is much more difficult than the first time. But I'm having trouble with Flashback Express a little bit. I wanted to discuss briefly the nature of exorcism. We just saw Mark chapter 1, verse 21 through 27, and it's been called a programmatic passage. We spoke about some of the elements of it. It's basically presented as a teaching in a synagogue, which basically consists in casting out this demon. And it's said to be a teaching according to exousia or authority, which we have explained has to do with this dominion given to one like a son of man in Daniel 7. And so, what Mark has chosen to present to begin the public ministry of Jesus is this uh, manifestation of power over evil. And we really don't get too much into, whether these were epileptic problems or maladies, or whether there was more demonic possession back then, or whether the primitive pre-scientific world explained so many things on the basis of demonic possession. Uh, Obviously, we don't much, you know, believe in, in so many cases of demonic possession. The church today would require a real psychiatric evaluation before deciding that the only remedy would be an exorcism. But I do think that within the world of Mark and of Jesus and of the ills that afflicted people, obviously many blind and lame, and women with blood flows, and people who have died, uh, oftentimes just dead. You would have to go to the Gospel of John to find somebody really, really dead and stinking. I still remember the story of St. Teresa of Avila, who at age 20, as I recall, was given up for dead, laid in the bier, funeral, bier there, and they put wax in her eyes and everything to close her eyes, and her father would not allow her to be buried, so she came back to life in about 3 days or so. So there are borderline cases of whether there's a real death or not. So we're not going to get into all the details as to exactly what it was that Jesus was doing with all the exorcisms. Uh, but clearly, he was known to do these marvelous deeds. And I think even the Jewish tradition, the Talmud, would recognize that. They would attribute it to, evil forces. I think the Talmud calls him a Samaritan, which is tantamount to being a magician. That same accusation is found in John's Gospel, chapter 8. So that denying that he had these unusual powers to heal is not the way to go, I don't think. But the exact nature of what he was doing remains unclear. But clearly, I think the presentation is that Jesus had a capacity to heal. And we could even begin with a psychosomatic type of approach where the soul or the mind affects the body. That's what psychosomatic is. We know that from the Eastern world, that they have studied much more than the Western world the interaction between mind and body. And very unusual things can happen if your mind is aligned a certain way. So Jesus must have had an incredible power of good influence and being able to tame beasts, so to speak, and to tame and to heal things that were happening. I'm reading about Lourdes cures and their medical testimony that's way beyond my capacity to understand because it's all extremely technical. 25 medical doctors examining somebody that they finally declare medically unexplainable, and then it's given to the Episcopal Commission who declares that this was an instantaneous miraculous cure with no other explanation. So. Uh, I'm not going to try to explain supernatural type healings, except to concentrate on the fact that Mark's gospel is presenting Jesus as incredibly powerful to heal. You have leprosies coming up now. Leprosy was a variety of skin diseases. Even clothes could have leprosy, walls could have leprosy, mold, etc. And so this leper was instantaneously healed. We're going to see that next time. So we'll have to continue perhaps talking about that there's a healing in Mark 8 of the blind man, which seems to be gradual. And then some scholars associate that with the idea that, it's parallel to a gradual recognition of who Jesus is. So there's a lot of different things that could be explored, but suffices to say that this first act in the public ministry of Jesus is considered to be programmatic, meaning that his teaching, which is in a way a Torah or a new way of relating to God that really capacitates one to overcome evil and sin. We know that Israel awaited the time when Yahweh would circumcise the heart of Israel so that it would be able to love God with all its heart. And so this would be the new covenant, by the way. This would be originally the separate covenant in Moab, after the Sinai or Horeb covenant. But in the same Deuteronomic school, you've got Jeremiah 31 talking about make a new covenant, write the law in their hearts. By the way, Qumran also considers itself the community of the new covenant and talks of themselves as the converts of Israel. And I remember that there's a circumcision of the heart passage. I mean, this was classic Judaism. This is not an invention of Christianity. What differentiates Christianity is the proclamation that in Jesus this is fulfilled, even if incipiently. We're still waiting for the second coming, for the full messianic age to be here. And so we have the first fruits, if you will. But that is the Christian faith. So that these healings take place, hard to deny. Exactly what all these demonic cases were is harder to determine. We have the passage of taking away the fever of Simon's mother-in-law. So that is an interesting day in a life, it's been called, because it's going to be followed by when evening came and the sun set, they brought to him all who were sick and had demons or were possessed, and they gathered at the door. I spoke about that the Anchor Bible article on Capernaum talks about Peter's house and how it was laid out in Roman style with the divisions of the streets, etc. And people would be gathered at the door, so that when we get to the paralytic in chapter 2, they're going to have to lower him through the roof. And then I also spoke about in my lost recording that Jesus, Mark takes the time, I suppose, to narrate how Jesus would rise extremely early in the morning when it was still very dark to pray. Luke has Jesus praying all the time, You would think Mark is a little bit cruder and is not as sensitive perhaps to the praying Jesus, but he's chosen right from the beginning to say that Jesus was known to spend a long time in prayer, rising very, very early, which is an Old Testament commonplace to wait the dawn or wait for the dawn and to rise very early. It's the time you meet God, etc. Oh Lord, you are my God. With you, I break the dawn, or the dawn breaks. I wait for the dawn with you in Psalm, I think 63. And so we have this picture of the day in the life of Jesus, some of the scholars have called it. And then we also mentioned that he doesn't allow the demons to reveal his nature, because human beings can only know who Jesus really is when the centurion sees the manner in which he died. Otherwise, in the gospel, the narrator, the Father, Jesus, and the demons know who he is. This so-called messianic secret, I think, is more accurately described as the Son of God secret. Son of God in a different sense than just the Messiah, or just Israel, the firstborn son, or just the righteous sufferer in the book of wisdom. He's Son of God in a very unique way. And finally, he goes around Galilee uh, and preaching to all the towns. And we're going to get to the leper next, but I'm going to stop there, and hopefully um, I'll be successful with this recording.